Hi everyone. Hi, thanks for joining us. I think everyone should be connected now. So thanks for joining us for the Writers Block Presents Enterprise Hub Pitch to Production with the lovely Luke Barnes. So a bit about Enterprise Hub before we start. It is a fantastic programme which provides 12 hours of free business support to Liverpool City residents. Writing on the Wall is the only creative partner of Enterprise Hub, and we can offer you initial consultation about your business idea, freelance plan, or an existing business, and then connect you to the main hub, who will then connect you to a business advisor. So it's free business support basically for people in the LCR, which is a really great service. And today, to talk about all things career related, is Luke Barnes. So a bit about Luke Barnes, if you don't already know him. Writing for both screen and stage, Luke has found significant success in his work, winning the Scotsman Emerging Talent Award, as well as being runner-up in Off West End Awards for Most Promising Playwright. Luke's theatre credits include Freedom Project, The Jumper Factory, The Sad Club, and All We Ever Wanted Was Everything. For the best viewing purposes today, please watch this event in speaker view, and feel free to turn on your cameras if you feel comfortable doing so. This event is being live streamed to YouTube, so if you don't feel comfortable, no worries at all, just keep your camera off. It goes without saying at WOW that we have a zero tolerance policy for any hate speech. We only ask that you treat each other with respect at all times, or you will be removed from the event, no questions asked. There will also be a Q&A at the end after I've done with my questions. So if you want to pop your questions in the chat, I can go through those at the end and read them out for you. Or if you're feeling brave, you can use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. If you click on the three dots and then on reactions, you can raise your hand. And then Amy, who's taking our event today, will bring you to the front and you can unmute yourself. There she is. And ask your question to Luke directly. So welcome, Luke.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Really well, thanks. Really well. Really
Nice.
well. Thanks for having me again here, still here.
Yeah, still here. No worries. So yeah, interesting one today because I've been at WOW for a few months now. I kind of work in the marketing side, and my experience of writing really comes from more the journalism side. So I don't have much creative experience, and I don't have any clue really how you go about working in theatre and how that happens. So I thought that before we start, for anyone here who's interested maybe but doesn't really know the practicality of it, if you could talk us through, first of all, your creative process for writing a play, and then how you go about pitching that to theatres and how that kind of works.
So it's really interesting. I mean, I think it's quite a longer process than, is that me making funny noises? It's not, quite a longer process than you might think. I mean, the first thing I think you have to do, or I had to do, I think it's probably still true, is produce something, not like produce something and then stage it, but write something that is absolutely fundamentally reflective of your values and your taste as an artist. So I think the first thing you have to do is write something that you think is the thing you'd like to see, the thing you think is missing. And that's kind of the starting place for everything. And once you've done that, then you can share it with people you want to try and collaborate with, and hopefully start a relationship. You're not asking for anything at this point. You're just saying, I've done this thing. I think you're cool. Can we be friends? And then once you've done that, I think the next stage is to try and suggest projects that would be mutually beneficial to both those parties. So like one common misunderstanding about like writing for theatre is that you sit and you think you write something that's amazing, and then you get someone to stage it because it's amazing. It's not really about that in the UK. It's more about writing something that is the perfect collaboration between these two parties in this moment of time. So once you've got something, once you've got your calling card, the next thing to do is try and produce projects that fit these two people coming together in this moment. And I do that mainly by just chatting first. If I want to work with someone, I'll chat, or they want to work with me, we'll have a chat, and then I'll sort of like I'll try to think about what we have in common, what our like common objectives are, what our shared ideals are. And then I'll go away and I'll write like a little proposal. It's just like 2 pages long maximum. The proposal, the same thing I've been saying in these workshops the whole time. It's the exact same process. It's like, what do I want to talk about? Why does this thing exist? What do we hope the world will change like for this existing? Why are these bodies doing it? What's the political significance of these bodies making this thing? And then what the form is, what the story is. And I'll just do like 2 pages on that. And then we'll knock it back and forth until we're both happy with it. Or they might just say it's shit. I don't want to talk. Sorry, it's not very good. I don't want to talk to you anymore. And then we'll try and find money to do it. Either these people you're collaborating with will have access to money from organizations or from buildings, or not more commonly, equally commonly, apply money for the Arts Council. The Arts Council is a really invaluable resource. It has a lot of limitations, I think, but also amazing resource for artists in the UK. And you can apply for it for loads. So if you can apply for it to write on your own, you apply for R&D, you can apply for the whole, to make the thing, you apply for developing practice. Like there's a lot of like ways you can get money from them. But the next stage for me would be to apply, if I was to do this and do it with someone and they weren't in an organization or building, apply to the Arts Council and ask for money to play around for a bit, try some ideas to flesh out that thing, and then maybe write a script, maybe do R&D, and then eventually maybe make it. That'll be the sort of like brief process. But the first and foremost, most important thing is to have a calling card that is you, and making friends with that first, because it's really hard to find collaboration. I found this when I started working in television films. Like without that calling card, you're just someone people think is cool without any proof you can do it, or proof you've got like a gesture as an artist. So like that's the most important thing. The next thing is finding relevant collaborations, not just being like, here's my next play, will you do it with me? It's like, what's the relevant thing we can do together? And build projects with collaborations, with collaborators. That's my take on it anyway, I think, the creative process for it. And then like, obviously, once you've got the money to do it, you've got to write it. And that's the next hard part. But that's like a chat for another time, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you've talked a lot about stuff that I'm going to go on to later there in terms of like making those connections with people. And I know you talked a lot about sort of your values and how important that is when creating like a production. But I think what you said there about like just like the practicalities of it, like Arts Council funding and stuff, that's something that even when you do pursue creative like disciplines into like a university level, you never really taught about these things, like how to actually do a funding application, for instance. You're not given like the practical advice for that. And yeah, I was wondering if you could talk about similar sort of stuff for like the production phase, and what happens once you've sort of got that collaboration with the theatre, and how you then go about translating what you've written onto the stage.
So I think once I've like agreed on that 2-page document with a collaborator, that's effectively most of the work done. The next bit is actually just like trying to materialize that into something that's really achievable on stage. And like, it depends, because there are a lot of like artistic and practical production limitations with every project. You know, like if you're making a big show with the National Theatre, you can do whatever you like. You'd be like, 40 actors, you can have a big song, yada, yada, yada. But if you're making a show like with real people, there are real practical limitations on that. Like people might drop out at the last minute. Someone might decide they hate acting, never do it again. Someone can't act, so you have to sort of like fit the show around them. So it depends on what the thing is. But the important thing, as ever, I keep saying it, is to nail down why you're doing this and how you're doing this right at the start. Because the more clear you are on that, the start of the process, the easier the rest of the thing is. Then it's just writing. But yeah, once you've got the collaborators, I would say once you've found a collaborator with a building or a partner, next practical thing to do is apply for money to get it from the Arts Council or from a building or from whoever, and then use that money to either write it or just play around with the ideas. And then once you've written it, another thing you can do is then you can go to anyone in the world who thinks another third collaborator producer wise and say, do you want to give us money to make this thing? So you go to a building, you go to an independent producer, you go to a company, and you can ask for a number of things at that stage. You can either say, I want you to make this show with us, or you can say, I want to do the show here, but I'm gonna go and apply for the money to make it, and we'll raise half it, so the limitations off you. Or I've done that before. So when we did Orphan Was Everything, the Bush Theatre in London asked us to do it on their main stage for like a 2-month run. And we were like, yeah, amazing, we've made it, they're going to pay for everything. And then they're like, here's the deal. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this is how theatre actually works. So we had to like, they backed us for half the money and like in-kind support. In-kind support is like nothing you can ask for. In-kind support means like they'll give you things they have for free. So like if you want rehearsal space, the everyman might have that. You need to have to give that for free.
Yeah.
They might have marketing support thing because they can do that. And they might have a stage. Well, we won't give you that in kind, but like they might have dramaturgical support, like an artist in the building might help you do that stuff. In kind support, they might give you. The other thing is you might go to them and say, I want to do this play, and they'll be like, okay, well, we love it. We'll give you this much money. You've got to raise the rest. And then that's when you go to the Arts Council. And that's when you start applying. Another useful thing to know about is charitable trusts. So in the case of was everything, Bush paid for a bit of it, Middle Child, the company paid for a bit of it, and then but we didn't have enough. We were like, I think about 40 grand short to make it safe. Like we could have done it, but I think if it went badly, we would have lost a fortune. We'd game over everyone. So it wasn't worth the risk. So we had to go and find, I think, 40 grand. I really luckily managed to find it from a bunch of charitable trusts who each chipped in a bit. Because like the thing is, I know it sounds really impenetrable, but like if you just look at the companies that support buildings in Liverpool and the surrounding, wherever you are around the surrounding area, they're more than likely open for submissions. So like I got that money from a fund that I know supports every theatre in London effectively. I know, and I heard on the grapevine, was a massive Liverpool fan. so I got in touch with them, and I wrote a play about the club ages ago, and this person saw it, and we got chatting. And you've got to go through hoops. Like there is like a number of practical things you've got to do. You've got to register the company or do it with a charity, and you've got to like. But yeah, so that's the next thing to do. Then you can like think about that, and then hopefully you can find the money and do it, and everyone gets rich. Well, yeah. I've never other people do, but I am still sadly not rich.
Yeah, we'll get onto the questionable riches later, but I think what you said about like having those connections and knowing about potential funders and that kind of thing, it proper strikes me as well that like my experience of writing is very like solitary. Like I'm not really collaborating with that many people, whereas like in theatre or film there's so many more people involved and so many more people you're going to be working with. And I was just wondering if you had sort of any advice to someone who's coming into this completely fresh, maybe doesn't have much like networking experience, maybe coming into theatre like later in life, and what you would kind of say to help maybe boost their confidence with making these connections.
Yeah, I think like every practical connection, every like fruitful connection I've ever made has been really simply because I'm a fan. You know, like really simply because I think these people are awesome. These people share my values. These people do the things that I want to do, and I just ran with that because like you can smell bullshit a mile away. If you go and say I love you because you've got a really big fancy theatre, but you don't actually care about it, they'll sniff it off. A, B, and B, you want to knock on doors that are open to you. You don't want to knock on doors that are going to be closed to you because definitely closed to you because there's no point. Even if they get open, I've done it before. I've managed to get commission off someone who I know didn't really, we weren't a natural match. And I don't think they're a massive fan of mine. And I wasn't at theirs, but they were quite high profile. And I did the job. And then I was like, you hate this. I hate this. We're like compromising everything. So we've made nothing. Like, because we're compromising, we've ended up doing nothing. There was nothing about this. And it's an absolute waste of time. Absolute waste of time. So my advice would be like, just be a mega fan and like tell people why you like their stuff. And hopefully, you know, if you like their stuff, you share values, you can share your own ideas and become fans of each other and then go and make friends that way. But like, that's the big thing. Be a fan. Like it's nothing, no one's ever annoyed that someone likes their stuff.
No, that's true.
If you give genuine reasons, you know, genuine reasons and like why. It's really interesting because like when you like meet actors like for auditions and stuff, they come in, they always go like, oh, I love this. I'm a fan. You're like, okay, that's really nice. But then you're like, questions like why? Do you actually share these ideals? Do you actually share these ideals? Like if you're coming to meet on a project, if you're writing to someone saying you've loved this thing, you've got to be able to say why you love it. You know, I like you say, like I read this thing last night and I love the fact that you're speaking up for this thing and like you're sharing this value and like it's the form of it is so that's really what I think theatre should be. I think that's the type of language you got to use. Really simple question, just like why have you written this that I resonate with? Why is the way you've written this why do I resonate with the way you've written it, and how do I relate to the politics and the humans in it? And then you come in from that perspective, you're just like, you know, if you came to me and you were like, I read Or Almost Everything. I really feel that like millennials are really let down and hopeless and lost, and like it really spoke to me that way. And the form of it was so cool because of that gig theatre thing. We made the big party, and that's what I want to experience storytelling like. And I'd be like, oh, you understand me? You know, we're on the same wavelength. If you came to me and you were like, I've done that, and you're like, and by the way, I think I've written something you might all think is cool or whatever. If you're a director or actor, whatever you are, I'd be like, I'd probably read it to be like, this person is on the same page as me, we're on the same team, you know. Yeah, I think like there's something articulating why you like stuff and why you're a fan of stuff is really important because it just makes you genuine.
Yeah, it's weirdly kind of like similar in marketing. Like you're gonna share stuff, like marketing gets a bad rep, but like if you're gonna share stuff convincingly and to have like an impact on people, you have to like really believe in it. Like that's part of it, and especially like making connections in like the arts industry and stuff. Like you have got to be a fan, and you've got to really have like a vested interest in stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think yeah, you've spoken a lot about like your work is naturally very politically engaging, and you've spoken about wanting to preserve your values and stuff. And especially just like in the time we live in, the government we live under, like there's clearly like a potential clash, for example, if you're creating something that's politically charged and might spark a reaction, potential like people don't want to see that. People don't want to invest in something that could be quite have quite an evocative reaction. I was just wondering if you've had any kind of encounters in with that, or if that plays a factor in your work, or do you just think stop it?
Again, I'm aware I'm like a broken record, but it boils down to the same thing. It's like the act of you sitting down to make something you hope that has a repercussion in the real world. And for me, it has always been about making the world better. You have to in some way try and heal something. I think like, but this is because I'm also a cis straight white man. Do you know what I mean? So like, I'm really aware that I don't really exist in those radical opposition spaces the way other people do. So then there is more value in other people being like, this system doesn't serve me. Fuck you. I'm going to burn it down. Whereas I'm like, oh, let's chat about this. White guys, let's chat about why we're all awful. I know. Do you know what I mean? But it's a different thing. I mean, like, I'm really aware of it, but again, it depends on the specifics of where you do it. Like, I did a show a few years ago at Hampstead Theatre in London, and like, it's interesting there because my play was about like how performative nature of what being middle class means, like being really caring about things and being open. But when you're confronted with things that actually disrupt your lifestyle and slightly lose your shit, that's when you're really testing your values. And that was what that play was about. And we did it at Hampstead, which is a really wealthy part of London, really white middle class, and like they fucking hated it because but that was my aim. Was like, how can we have a good conversation? They were like, well, actually, I'm great and you're all stupid. So so I'm really aware of it. But again, it comes down to why you're doing it and where you're doing it. And I think actually and then how you're doing it as well. Because what happens is some will say this place needs to have this conversation, but how can you do it without really annoying people? Is another question. I remember that saying the guy who ran Hampstead then, he was like, after the show, a comic meeting, he was like, if you want to like keep making work on these big stages, you've got to be able to make Tories like you. And I was like, well, I'm not sure they ever will. but then I thought about it. I was like, he's actually got a point. If you want to actually talk about like progressive changing politics, like making people question themselves, I think you actually have to be nice to them, understand them, and come from that sort of like that generous place rather than the other place. But again, saying that from a very sort of like privileged position, so I'm aware of that. You know.
Yeah, and it can be a bit of a vicious cycle, I think, in terms of like how things are represented in media, because like the people who hold the power, you do have to kind of appease them sometimes, and then that results in things being boiled down, and then we don't get like radical representation out there. But yeah, I think it's interesting, and it's that like really cheesy phrase of like everyone's a critic now, but like with social media, it's not like theatre used to be where you would like wait for a critic's review and that would kind of like make or break a piece. Like there's so much there's more of like a community around theatre on like social media and the internet. And yeah, when you're writing or when you're like producing and then you hear like responses, does that kind of factor into how you then create your next work? Like, is that in the back of your mind?
Oh my God, yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
making stories like this is constantly saying, here's where I'm at. This is what I think is useful, and everyone else being like, well, here's where I'm at. And you're like, okay, well, I've got loads to think about. Prime example, I mean, stupid stuff. It's like when I made when we made No One Tell Me the Resolution, the hamster play, we did a workshop at it with the RSC. And I was like, get any actors in, any actor, and they'll do it. And they were like, why have you called us in? And I was like, well, because you're actors. It was three women. And they were like, well, you've got a black girl and an Asian girl and a white girl. And I was like, yeah. He goes, well, why? And I was like, well, you're just actors. They would know this is it's important, significant. Like, it was just an R&D. It wasn't a show. It was just like getting out to talk about it. And I was like, it was just actors. And they're like, no, it's significant. And I was like, you know what? Casting is significant. I was like, of course it is. Of course it is. It's a political choice for any body in any part. That's a political choice, and that has repercussions about how those people behave and how this behavior is seen on the outside. When you look at on the outside world, when an audience comes in, I was like, of course that's political. Of course it is. And that stuff happens every time I do something. Well, something will come up where I'll be like, of course, be more useful. Down to stupid shit about like how you arrange your day. How you arrange your day is like, if you finish a working day at 6 o'clock, it's really hard for people to pick up kids. Stuff like that. And like stuff you don't think about when I exist in my incredibly sheltered world, but yeah, every day.
What is your day to day? Because I read there was like a book once, like a few years ago that came out. I read that was like it was like all famous artists, and it was like their daily routine, and it was just like chaos because just like loads of writers, and they all like some of them work at midnight, and some of them start at 7 a.m. and log off at 5 p.m. So yeah, what does your day look like?
Much more relaxed than that. I think that's people who do that stress me out, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I work 10 to 6 every day. I'm just like, I'll start at 10, I'll finish at 6, and that'll be it. Then I'll stop in the evening. And because I live I made conscious choice to live somewhere where my financial pressure is quite low. So I don't need to earn loads of money living here. I don't need to be earning 50 grand a year just to get by and have a life. It's infinitely less than that. And that's really good for my sort of like, one of the things I lived in London for 10 years, and like I was paying about just over £1,000 a month for a room when I left, and I was like, this is absolutely unsustainable. And coming out of there, I was like, I need to just like be able to do writing and also have space around to consume art without going out every night. And I need to space to like exercise and space to like do normal stuff and be in touch with the real world. So I work 10 to 6, don't work the weekends, don't work in evenings. Even when there's like loads of pressure, I won't do it because it fucks your head up. And like, if you do that, if you're constantly on it, if you're constantly on this thing all the time, your mind jars. It's like, it feels like, what it feels like to me is like when you put like a spanner in a cog, the whole thing goes, you're like, oh my God, I know I need to get this right, but I don't know what it is anymore. And I'm just like doing stuff. We're taking like even like 12 hours off, including sleep or whatever, and just being like, gonna relax and just like let my mind wander, go for a walk, do the washing up, clean the house. Your mind solves stuff for you. Sometimes it's more productive to do nothing is to just force yourself into stupid hours. I remember a friend of mine, he was like, I've got a deadline next week, so I'm going to work all-nighters for 2 days. And I was like, that's not clever, that's just bad time management.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you doing working for 40 hours straight, you dickhead?
I learned that lesson in uni.
Really? It's bad time management. Like, you're not going to get the best work out yourself. All you're doing is just like cramming in your low energy performance for a sustained period of time. With your like full energy, you probably do that quarter of the time, half the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important to, I mean, even if we're talking about like, even for Enterprise Hub, like looking at career stuff and like how we manage our time is really important looking in that, because you can't have like a sustainable career really if your working patterns aren't sustainable. Like you need to have something that gives yourself a break and yeah, puts you in the right mindset to do work consistently.
Another thing to remember is like, if you're an artist, you're writing about the world. So you've got to live in the world. You've got to have relationships. You've got to like have family and friends and partners and whatever, like hobbies. You've got all that stuff you have to have. But you can't ever talk about the world. It's all theory otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, moving on to slightly more practical question, but you mentioned before about living in London. And I've got a question about more financial side of working in theatre, and for a lot of people who we work with or are interested in the Writers' Block and Enterprise Hub, there's definitely like potential financial anxiety there. How do I sustain this as a career? So yeah, I'd like to ask you about that, and how you, if there was any time where you had to like supplement your income, if there was times where you were doing multiple things, and how you then made the step into making this your career and doing this all the time.
Right. So this is like quite a long-winded bullshit answer, but I do think it's good. So like first thing is like doing one thing at a time is mental, because we can do one thing at a time physically, but like having a year and saying to write one thing, if it's your full-time job, is really stupid, because it might the way that like writers contracts are structured are producers get a bailout phase at 4 points during the process. So if you sign the contract, say, yeah, I'll do it, you get paid a little bit. Deliver a treatment, you get paid a little bit. Draft one, a little bit. Draft two, a little bit. And like, it depends what that means, drafts, but like, effectively 2 points in that process. And then the last one when they choose to do it. So you need to assume that like at some point, one of those projects won't go all the way, because that's the nature of it. So for my money is, you need to have numerous projects in various stages of development throughout all the time. And you need to give yourself, I would say in my practice, I try and develop double things that would give me double the income of what I'd need to live for a year, or any given time, assuming that half of them will fall through, assuming that like the ones, and then little bits make up. So like more than half fall through, but little bits make up. So I'd say like try and develop project when you get to the stage of like asking for money to do stuff, as double the income. Second thing is like, if you do like a normal job 10 to 6, it becomes like a normal job. So you're writing all the time. So hopefully you're producing enough to generate income. And the last thing is all about savings. Is really, really important in this, because you don't necessarily know. You might know you got money coming in, but these organizations are so scatty. They might not pay. Like I reckon I'm owed about $5,000 at the minute. Just people not paying me. Just literally people just not getting around to it. And like so what I do is, anytime I get a paycheck, any amount, whether it's £10 or £1 million. No, they haven't paid £1 million, but any amount.
You wish.
I wish one day. 70% of that check goes into a savings account. So, and that savings account, this is really boring, but it's really useful. 70% goes to savings account. And that savings account for me, that's where my bills and rent come out of every month. Anything left from that isn't at my main account. I can spend that for fun. And then end of the year, my taxes come out of that account as well. Anything left over, then so end of the year, I've paid all my bills for the year, I've paid my taxes for the year. End of the year, what I hope will be in there is enough for my rent and bills for the next year. And anything more than that goes into a third account, and I can spend that on maybe a treat, like a holiday or whatever. But I haven't been there for a while. Theoretically, that's there. But it's really important to save, because I think what happens to me quite often is I lose track of how much I've earned, and then I also lose track of how much tax I've got to pay. So that's stupid. So like, it's really important to save loads and just budget for you to have a shit year. Because like, if you've got a shit year coming, we don't know, but like if you do, and you've got money for your bills and your rent, you'll get by for a bit. So you can find some more work, no matter what that is. So prepare for a shit year by 70% savings is what I do.
Yeah, I think no, that wasn't a bullshit answer at all, by the way. That was really good, practical advice. And yeah, I think it's difficult, especially for people who maybe like are already working full time or something and haven't made that jump into like going to freelance and then becoming, a creative and doing that. There's definitely like a concern about whether you'll have like a safety net there, and that can be like a huge leap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think this is a question I really wanted to ask you. It's frustrating as well when there's kind of a lot of lack of funding in the arts, which make it especially difficult for people who are trying to pursue it. And you tweeted recently about the announcement from Rishi Sunak about wanting to make another Beatles museum in Liverpool.
I can't hear.
Oh, can you not? Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, you tweeted about Rishi Sunak wanting to make another Beatles museum in Liverpool.
Oh wait.
Um, and yeah, and how frustrating that is. And I was wondering if you could talk specifically about like how that relates to, arts communities in Liverpool and why that is such a frustrating decision.
Liverpool's fascinating. I mean, like Liverpool, like the theatre. It's really. I've only been here for 3 years. But I can't talk about like this in any real depth. From what I observe, like there's loads of people doing awesome stuff that I don't think have the resources to level up and do that on a mid and in theatre from like small scale to mid scale. And I think like that money would be really, really well spent if you could either invest in artist development to teach people to do their stuff in a way that is sustainable long term on a slightly more commercial budget. I think that would be life changing for the city. Yeah, that's the main thing, and also just like organizations be like 20 stories high. I mean, they would make actual real impact in talks if they got that money. You guys would do, collective accounts would do. Like, there's actual real good that can be done with that. But the big thing for me, from my perspective, is I always want more money to go into artists' pockets. And I think about Liverpool is like I think there are loads of people. Well, I can think of like maybe 50 people who I think would really benefit from giving a fraction of that money. Just take some time out to write. Just take some time out, reflect themselves as art, and see what that come up with. Because like that's the difference, isn't it? The only difference between I remember when I first started writing, I was on the Royal Court Writers Group, like the old one years ago, and Simon Stevens came in. He said like the only difference between me and you is that I've got time to think. And I was like, that's fucking such good observation. It's such a good observation. And I just think like if one thing that artists ever want is money to sit down and think what they want to do next. And like that would be life. I mean, like a fraction of that would be life change. And the idea that you'd spend that on another people's museum is absolutely nonsensical to me. I mean, yeah. But yeah, I think like if I had a magic wand, that's the thing I'd do in this city. And also
Yeah,
like a small scale new writing venue, but that would be that's a
yeah,
hard.
that'd be amazing. And I think, yeah, since you've been working in theatre, do you think it's gotten better or worse, or just stayed the same in terms of that kind of funding and support?
I think I've been exposed to how much worse it is than I thought it was on many levels. And but I do think it's getting better in terms of things like accessibility and representation, new form. I think all that stuff's changing. I think it is being democratized in a way that it wasn't at all when I started. I left drama school in 2009, and I came into a world that was pretty much all people look like me, really, at my level, at my age, and mostly above me. And anything outside of that was like mad. It was like mad. It was like, this is our black play, this is our gay play, this whatever,
Yeah,
as opposed to like what we want to talk about, what conversations we need to have, how to have the conversation now. It was like, we are giving power away. We the establishment are lending our power to this one person for 5 minutes to come back again. That's changed. In terms of like funding and stuff, I wasn't really aware of it well, actually, no, I'm really aware that loads of stuff has disappeared since I started doing it. When I did Bottleneck and Chapel Street, that was funded by Escalator East. That's just disappeared. All that stuff like Cove gone, like all the writers programs like Cove, they've all gone. Yeah, a lot of it's gone. But I think the Arts Council have been better about spending the money a different way now. So I do think they've been better at redistributing. I know that they have started to spread the money out to more towards artists, less towards organizations and companies, which is great. But yeah, I think a lot of stuff has disappeared actually, unfortunately.
yeah. I think as like a consumer, like someone who just watches theatre rather than a theatre maker, it definitely feels like it's changing for the better, but you can still like it's still clear that, for example, a lot of like queer theatre is from small organizations and not so much stuff you're going to get in like big theatres, like stuff in the National Theatre. Like there's still a bit of a disconnect between that, um, and that can be. It's nice to have like community organizations and community theatres that support that, but yeah, it does feel like there's like this new theatre that's moving forward and being very progressive, and a lot of like traditional theatres are very much like stuck in their roots.
Yeah, and it's so interesting with that because like this is nothing. This more time spent in this business, the more you learn how theatres actually run. There's a lot of will in those buildings for those conversations to change, but also they've got a whole group of people above them who you don't even know. The boards, like the trustees, all these people these faceless people who you'll never meet, you'll never know their names. Well, you might know their names, but like it's a whole thing. It's a real whole thing, and like nothing changes till all those buildings deconstruct those hierarchies, you know. And it's really interesting. It's not even really about having representation at those levels. It's about, I think it's about like reimagining how theatres actually work. And at the moment, one thing I've been thinking a lot about is like, if more money goes to artists and less goes to buildings, and buildings become about accommodating artists and dramaturgically and like developing them and developing pieces, then it has to become more democratic because they can't produce much themselves. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not an AD. I don't really have those thoughts, but I do think that like more money to artists, less to buildings, and buildings become accommodating to them is probably not a bad thing.
Yeah, and just whilst we're on this, before we move on to questions, I read your Q&A with Bush Theatre, and you spoke about this a little bit when you were talking about like gig theatre and sort of like rejuvenating those old systems. You said a lot of people from outside of the theatre fandom feel that theatre is too long, overpriced, boring, irrelevant, dull, over intellectual, and happens in buildings that communities don't feel are theirs. And that building's bit especially, like what you just said then, I think is really important about it being sort of an artist first thing rather than like an artist and community first thing rather than those old fashioned buildings.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, if you ever get a chance, like, you should read David Land talk about this because he's so eloquent. He says he used to run the Young Vic in London. The Young Vic's under him was my favorite organization. His theory was like it was like the world class theatre that's plugged into what was it? Plugged into, I forgot the name of the place. So, Lambert and Lambert, whatever that area that the Young Vic is in. World Vic's there, plugged into the area that looks out to the world. And I was like, of course it is. It's like a building serves a specific place. So the work should be in link with this specific place. The work should also be tied into the rest of the world, being able to have like a global resonance, and the work should be the best it possibly can. It seems to be as simple as that. You know, the way that model works, I mean, like they did the thing where they have their main stage works, like their big plays, and they have a thing called taking part. And taking part, what they do is they commission 2 small plays that are thematically linked to those on the big stage, and they're made by emerging writer and director, made with people in Lambeth and where the fuck is it? Lambeth or somewhere else? Anyway,
I have no idea. Can't help you.
That's it, Southern Lambeth. So and then they make it with the participants. Once you've done that show, you can get free tickets to theatre for the rest of your life. So there's 20% tickets every night go for free to people who've done those shows, or just people who live in the area. Properly diversifying it. And like the more you link with these people and talk to them, the more you have like an actual steady audience, the more you have idea of what's going on in the place, the more it can be linked with the place and the conversations need to happen. And the less it's about like presenting genius. I'm sure we're aware that like a lot of the problems we have in Liverpool had in Liverpool is because of that. It's about this is what good is. And like there's no interest to me what you think good is. That is not useful to me. What's useful to me is going to a cultural space and having a conversation that I need to have in order for my society to be better. Hopefully done in a way that is high quality, entertaining, whatever those adjectives you use are. But that's what's important. That's what we need to focus on, not about what good means, because good is entirely subjective. And do you know what? If you're telling me what good is, then I'm gonna guess that you are wrong because you can't tell me what good and bad art is.
Yeah, it's entirely subjective, isn't it?
Exactly, completely.
Okay, so that's a really good, good point, well made there. And I think, I think that's a good place for my questions to end on. So we'll move into the chat. We've got a good one here from Sana who says, you said the other day that writing for stage and screen are completely different. Have you ever had ideas or pitches that have worked for both, or have changed from one to the other partway through the process?
No, I haven't actually. What I have done is though, I have previously finished the project and then sold it in the same idea in a different medium. but I'm aware that I'm starting again. So I'm aware that like I've finished the process saying theatre and I'm going to pitch it for TV or film or radio, but I've never done radio. In the same terms as like in that same idea. So I'll pitch the same impetus, the same like need to change, and the same story and the same characters, but the form will be completely different. But if it's changing mediums, I'll just start there and then see what they say. But never halfway through, because like my process is all about nailing down those big questions at the start. And I feel like if you've done that, then by the time you get to writing script, I think you already convinced yourself that it's worth doing that far.
Yeah, and in your Q&A with Bush Theatre, when you're talking about gig theatre, it's quite clear that you're thinking about the audience and their involvement, which is a completely different thing for film, I imagine.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
So our next question is from Nancy, who asks, do you do other side jobs / hustles if you don't get a writing job? Or did you used to, maybe?
Yeah, I did. I mean, like I did for the first like 3 or 4 years, I guess. I mean, I've done everything. I've worked, like worked in bars, theaters, all that stuff. I did that for years, and then I was really lucky that I was an actor for a while. I did like a TV show for years, and that paid me to like do about 2 years on this. But like I don't earn loads. I think it's important to say I don't earn loads of money. It's not like I'm like rolling in cash from doing this job. It's budgeted really, really well to like know that I can survive to the next thing and like be okay and like do some nice things. It's all about budgeting. It's really, and once you get the first job, it's just about budgeting. It's all about budgeting. It's the most boring answer ever. But yeah, cashing.
Yeah.
And like the writing's not just writing. There's also stuff like this. There's teaching. There's like royalties. You get royalties. There's writing think pieces. Loads. It's not just about writing scripts. This job. It's loads of stuff. Mentorship. There's like running courses. There's loads and loads of ways to like tie into this job that aren't necessarily about writing. Script reading. Yeah. Loads and loads. I do all aspects of that stuff because like it feeds you. All this feeds you. Like it's such a privilege to be able to do stuff like this and sit down and talk about what you find and listen to people like what they find, and hopefully you come off with a clear, either a deeper, more rigorous understanding of what you're talking about, or clarity about what you found was muddy. It all feeds in and all pays. But yeah, I've also done all the other jobs as well.
Yeah, and I think that is like the appeal a lot of the time, really, for doing stuff in like the creative sector. The fact that you can do all sorts and you can have a different, not every day is the same, and you get to dip into so many different things.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's the best thing about it. It's the best thing about it, I mean, like I assume most people try and do this job because they drawn to that,
Yeah.
Drawn to the office life, which actually my job actually is like an office life, but just do it alone. Saying that, saying the day, like I reckon I've left this. I reckon I've worked outside this room 4 days of the last 2 years. Maybe not true, but 7 days of the last 2 years. Absolutely nuts.
Yeah. Alex asks, in terms of the Arts Council funding, how likely do you think it would be for someone of a more mature age already wanting to develop writing for stage skills, already taking courses, for instance, to actually get such funding? What would such an application demonstrate?
Right. So here's the thing. I think that one of the biggest problems we've had traditionally in theatre is that there's been a confusion between new voices, which we mean for like new writing, meaning young, and it's been detrimental to our like understanding of society's relevance to theatre. It's not about being young; it's about being a new voice. And I think coming to writing a play with like having life experience and having a perspective and having depth understanding and knowing what to see and saying is invaluable. It's invaluable. It's a strength, not a weakness. Was my first thing I would say. But again, it's like playing into those questions, like why am I doing this thing? What to change for it? What's this? All those things spoke today. I'd say it's invaluable. I think it's really, really, really important that like we start to reimagine new voices away from young people, because actually, obviously young people generally really radical and ask big questions, but it's not more valuable than experience and radicalism. They're just different things. So yeah, I think it's a massive strength in my opinion. But I play it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have any advice for stuff like funding applications? Because I think, like I said in the past, it's been kind of not really talked about, not really taught. We're not really taught how to do things like this. And I've been following an art critic group called the White Pube for a while, who have become like really transparent with.
Oh, they're stuck on the back of my laptop.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I know which one you mean. Yeah, and they've got like a funding application library, which is like an amazing way for people to be transparent about what has worked and what hasn't, especially for people who wouldn't normally get that advice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just wondering if you had anything to talk about on that front.
I've never really done it, to be honest, because my big things was being finding collaborators that I think share the thing with, and usually those partners I find people have that skill set, because I don't have it. I've never made a full up. I've done bits of that. I've done like sections of an art council thing. They've asked me stuff. I've never done a full thing.
Yeah.
So I think like the people I know, I think experiences, if you can like shadow someone or just ask people in Liverpool, like people are so friendly and so like wanting to help. I'm sure if you ask someone who's done that before, they'll share it with you. But I've never had a massive experience in it. But again, it's like for me, it's just like honing down on social change and why you're doing all those things and why in this place. Answer those questions before you sit down to answer those ones, and then I think that's always a good starting place.
Yeah, and I think that leads back to like how important networking is in arts fields, because it's not just getting opportunities, but just working with people who are doing the same things as you, and getting that support or just like advice off people who have done things like that before.
Sure.
Another question we've got is
help you. I genuinely believe like you're like I've got this really specific question about the arts council thing. People will help you if you can go back to that thing about like why you're a fan of someone. People have time to answer a question.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, like there is, it's becoming more transparent and there are resources. I mean, Enterprise Hub in itself is free business support that you can just come and ask questions about like, things like this for. So yeah, just conscious of time. One more question we've got. What is your relationship to failure or missing the mark? Do you beat yourself up about it or find that it's key to learning something and doing it differently next time? That links to imposter syndrome as well. A lot of people who engaged with WoW have said they experience it. What advice do you have for people who experience imposter syndrome?
Right, so there's two things. I'll start with imposter syndrome, because I think this is really important to talk about. Imposter syndrome is really useful to you as an artist. If you don't have it, it means you're overconfident and you're going to botch the job. You're going to be like overconfident the job. You're going to give a half-assed thing. Imposter syndrome really means that you care and you're afraid of not presenting yourself in the best way. That's all it is. It doesn't mean you don't belong. Like, if you're doing the thing, then you belong to be doing the thing. Imposter syndrome. I read this thing. Jim McGovern said this boss thing. Bear in mind, he's like whatever 75, and he's won all the BAFTAs. Someone asked him what his biggest fear was, and he said being found out. And I was like, okay, you get that. So that means it's normal. It means if you're feeling if you feel that, imposter syndrome, it's normal. So actually feeling slightly like insecure about yourself or feeling a bit like you're out of your depth just means that you care and you want to do a good job. So start with that. Failure thing. I don't believe in failure. I think projects fall through. But that's not because you're bad or anyone's bad. It's because it could be a multitude of reasons. Mainly because it's a bad match is the main reason. Bad match of collaborators on a particular project. It may be that like someone in the whole thing, could not be you, could be you, doesn't have the skill set to do this specific thing, which happened to me last year. Like I got sacked off a job, off a TV job, and when it happened, I was like, that makes complete sense because I don't know how to do this. I was like, I don't know how to do this. It's just like a really simple thing. It's like, it was writing on someone else's show. So I was like, I can't do the voice. I can't do their voice. I don't get it. I don't care about it. So like, why would they hire me? Like for me, rationalizing all this stuff is really important. And like we do a thing where like, we artists, I do a thing where I get an email. If it's something I really care about, I'll disaster it instantly. I could catastrophize it. Yeah. I'll be like, they said they liked it. That means they're gonna sack me tomorrow. Or, so like the way to deal with that, this is great advice someone gave me. It was like, look, if you start doing that shit, if you start saying like, I've got this performance. I don't feel like I belong here. I feel like I'm an imposter. A really good exercise is to say, okay, what's at play here? There's two voices in my head. One saying that, one saying you're an imposter, you're shit, you don't belong here. Another is saying you might actually smash this and become a millionaire. You might actually be the best thing you've ever done. It might change your life forever. Both those voices are really unhelpful, both of them. So you've got to say, okay, well, what can I say to both these voices to shut them both up and just get on with it? So you might be like, yeah, maybe it could go well and be good. And maybe this might be a new thing, but practically all I've got to do now is sit down and do it. I've got to do this job the best I can. And to do that, I need to do this, and just do the thing and see what the result is. Because the minute you start saying these voices, you're fucked. You've got to rationalize both of them and put it into action and just do the thing, just do the next thing in really practical steps. And that's what solves it for me. And I'll just do it and I'll be like, I've done it now. So what's the next practical thing? They'll come back to you and they'll say, we thought about this. And you go, okay, fine, I can manage that. I'll do that thing. But the minute you go, oh my God, they've asked to do this. I've fucked it. Oh my God, I'm shit. They're going to sack me tomorrow. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy and it'll happen. Or if you go like, these fucking guys, what are they talking about? They don't know what they're doing. I'll do my thing. You'll get sacked. You know what I mean? So like, the best thing to do is just like, listen, do the next thing, be rational the next step, and silence those stupid voices because they play havoc. And that's what it all comes from. It's because you care about it and you want to go well. That's all it is. We've got to be rational about it and see what I practically do to do this thing.
Yeah. As someone who has anxiety, catastrophizing is like a massive thing for me. It's like,
Sure.
and it can be really off-putting in terms of work because you just always do have this worst case scenario in the back of your head. And I think, yeah, I imagine that's quite intense, especially for theatre when it's such like a live thing. Like, do you have like those voices ongoing when you're like about to perform or about to direct? Like, is that intensified or is that more for the creative process?
It's so interesting. I don't really act anymore. I mean, like, it's interesting because like I think like once I'm going to say it again, this is so boring, but answer those big questions at the start, you by that point believe in it. So I think by that point you're like, okay, I do actually think this is worth doing genuinely. So that'll get me through that bit. And then the catastrophizing thing, it's interesting because like there comes a point with writing where you just become numb to it. You're like, my feelings are dead now because I've been doing this particular project for so long. So now it's just practically solving. But if you've held on to that thing at the start, be like, this exists for this reason, and I've practically been rigorous, then like your response is going to be your response to it. Like this is me. This is literally, I've done everything I could have done here, and I think this matters, and I think this is for a reason. So here's me. And then someone come back and be like, by the way, you're shit. And you're like, well, maybe you think I am. Maybe I am. But I also kind of think that I did this. This has a meaning bigger than me. It's not about me. It's about the conversation. It's about the gesture. It's about yada, yada, yada. So like, take issue with the ideology, not me as a person.
You know? Yeah, definitely. It's like your parents used to say, your best is good enough and all that. Like if you've tried your best, then, you know, and like you said earlier, like from the very beginning of the event, like if you know that reflects your values, then that's the most you can hope for, really.
Sure.
Just two more questions quickly. We've got one from Polly who asks, is there anything you would have done differently when starting out?
I think to be honest, I had a really good starting out. I mean, like I made something that I really cared about in a form I really cared about with some people who I really respect, like some friends of mine who I thought were awesome. And that was the best thing for me. Was like I was really lucky that I just found. I mean, we don't talk anymore, but like it was like 12 years ago. But at the time, I was like, these people share my values, share my form, share everything. I was really, that was the lesson I took from that. If there's one thing I've done differently, it's a weird thing because like I think like if you looked at my career, like some of my friends, they would say some of the stuff the choices I made not right at the start, but a few years later, were based on my value systems, and they would have said there's probably better career choices to have made. But I wouldn't change that now. I think like all the stuff I made for those reasons of value, I think gave me a sort of like a conscience and a soul. So like That's why I'm not just writing episodes of so-and-so television just to pay the bills. I genuinely try making things I think are important. I think like that's what gave me that ability. So sometimes like those things that may look like mistakes aren't necessarily mistakes. But again, like if you ever start a project or someone offers you a project, the question you gotta ask is like, why would I do this? Why would I do this? And what would I hope would change as a result of me doing this? If you answer that question, look back at your whole career, you're like, everything counts. Everything was important. I've had a whole life of doing things that mattered at the time, which is more than a lot of writers can say, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
My therapy now.
I was literally like, back to catastrophizing.
I could be rich, but
but yeah, back to, you know, the anxiety of putting something out there. Ian says, I think there's also that fear of giving away a part of yourself, especially when the characters might need to be doing something that is in some way unacceptable, but there's a sense that it might reflect on you or cause people to think, oh, is that what you think / do? How do you kind of navigate that vulnerability with writing?
it's really interesting. I mean, like over lockdown, I went into I did loads of therapy in lockdown. Before that, I was like, yeah, that's what it was like for me. And what? But now I'm like, oh no, that's what it's like for me. Yeah, that's quite it. So, so I don't know. I'll find out. I'll let you know when it happens next. But previously, I was like, yeah, that's that. That's true. Sometimes, but yeah, it is interesting though, because like
Yeah.
the longer answer is that I think there are truths of all our experiences that like resonate truthfully with other people, and there are parts of it which like I've been judging this judging this playwriting prize at the moment, and one of the plays came in and like it suggested that the main character was based on a true story, and the main character's a bit of slight pedophilic tendencies, and I was like, don't know how I feel about this being platformed. I don't know how I feel about that. So that's very different than saying like sometimes I feel scared at a dance floor. I feel lonely.
Yeah.
I feel really lonely sometimes on a dance floor because I feel like, you know, I might have no value here anymore. That's very different than saying like sometimes I want to do something terrible.
Yeah.
But again, it's like you've got to ask yourself the question, why are you putting this thought into the world? You know, and if you're saying I want to say I feel lonely because a lot of people do, and maybe we'll feel less lonely together, it's very different than saying, yeah, I really fancy children. You know, what you know. Well, Lolita is popular. I haven't read. Look, I don't want to write about pedophiles.
But I think it's before you said that, I was going to throw my 2 cents in and say like, we have a lot of like these insecurities about like, oh, people are going to judge me, etc. But like, there's a lot of worse things out there.
Yeah,
and I think people need to go easy on themselves sometimes.
For sure. I mean, like you can look at like the whole modern British theatre is built on a group of like four or five poets who did just that, like Sarah Kane, Mark Raven, Anthony Nielsen, all that generation. That's all they did was talk about their darker selves in a mad form. So there's nothing wrong with it. I wouldn't feel scared.
All right. Well, I think unless anyone has any very last minute questions, I think we're good to wrap up here. So this has been a really good discussion. As I said to Luke before starting, this has been my first time hosting and it's been brilliant. So thank you, Luke, for making this very nice.
Good
yeah. Want to stay on?
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you, Luke, again for such a great discussion. Just like to say thank you to our Enterprise Hub funder, the European Regional Development Fund, and the Writers Bloc funders, the National Lottery Community Fund, Steve Morgan Foundation, and Community Foundation for Merseyside. If you've enjoyed this event, then please let us know. We'll be sending out a short feedback form. Takes like 2 minutes to fill in. If you could do that, that would be wonderful. And we'll also be sending out some links to all of Luke's events coming up on the Writer's Block. If you want to ask any more career-related, financial-related questions, or just any kind of support with starting a business, getting your writing career started, we'll be having an Enterprise Hub drop-in on Tuesday, the 16th of November from 4 till 5 p.m. So it'd be nice to see some of you there. And yeah, thank you again, everyone, for coming. Bye. We all good?